Hi, welcome to Here to There, hosted by Carolyn Taketa, former attorney, current small groups pastor, and life coach. Through monthly conversations with pastors, authors, and guests, we hope to stir your thoughts and encourage you to move from where you are to where you want to be, in your personal life, in your leadership, or in your ministry.
Years ago, I heard a leadership axiom that resonated with me and is so true, especially for small groups ministries. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. As small group point leaders, we probably understand more than most the importance of building relationships. And obviously, groups cannot happen without leaders and members. But what about the ministry as a whole? It can be really tempting for us to try to do everything on our own rather than to take the time and energy to recruit and build a leadership team that would help us move our ministry to the next level. So whether you're in a small church or a big church, we all need a variety of people, and we need a team to help our ministries thrive and to grow. So today we're going to talk about what kind of people you need on your team and how you can recruit them to join you. With me on the program today is an amazingly gifted recruiter. And the proof is not just the huge impact he has had in his day job as a small groups pastor at Saddleback Church since 1998, but his leadership of the small group network. And of course, I'm talking about Steve Gladen. Hi, Steve. Thanks for being on the program.
Hey, Carolyn. Always fun to be with you.
Of course, many of us know Steve Gladen, who has been the small groups pastor at Saddleback Church since 1998. He's the author of Small Groups with Purpose and Leading Small Groups with Purpose. And he recently released his third book, Planning Small Groups with Purpose, which is a practical guide to designing a healthy small groups ministry. And we'll talk with Steve about that a bit later in the program. Steve also founded the Small Group Network over 10 years ago with only a dozen small group point leaders and has built this wonderful global network that serves thousands of churches by recruiting one person at a time to join this team and to serve the kingdom together. So Steve is going to talk with us about 10 things to consider when recruiting a team. But before we launch into the first one, Steve, would you clarify what you mean when we talk about recruiting team members? First of all, what do you mean by a team?
Well, I mean, I have three interview questions, and one of them is, did you play an organized sport? And that's so important because team is a vital aspect to what you're trying to do, because there's no small group point person out there who has all the gift sets to make this ministry happen.
But I never played in organized sports, Steve, so I'm already disqualified.
Well, it's not that you're disqualified. It just tells me that, it just helps
that
us to know there might be other things. There may be other things that because we all can grow. We can all grow. It helps me know where I'm starting from.
All right.
But part of that is in teams that you've been on, you realize you're not the center of attention. You realize that you need other people around you. And sometimes that's intuitive, like in your case, Carolyn, or sometimes it's from others of us who've got to learn it when, because you play a team sport, you pick up those aspects that you're not the only one, but that it takes more people around you that have the different gifts to make the thing win in sports or make the thing happen in ministry. So why this is so important is that because we don't have all the gifts, you've got to recruit people that can help you. And so often in small group world, we recruit people that help us with the health and the care of small group leaders, which is very important.
Right.
But there's other aspects that we miss because caring for the network is one thing, building the network is another.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because the task is what's immediate for us. So we recruit people to do the task, which mostly is the care and feeding and shepherding of leaders. But perhaps we neglect the bigger picture. And you would say, Steve, this is true regardless of whether you have, you're a lay leader or you have a tiny team or you don't even have a team yet, as opposed to just even a huge environment where you obviously need more bodies there.
Well, again, you've heard me say this over and over again, that the Bible's built on a family system. And there's so many correlations because I have a tiny family, my wife and two kids.
Well, your dog?
Yeah, and the dog. Probably hear that dog a little bit later. But it takes a village to help raise your kids. And so you need other people around you. And I know from being in a smaller church that ran about 150, there was no way we were going to know the spiritual health of all 150 people because it's not 150, that's what comes. Yes. But you're probably dealing that you have more people that come in frequently. So you've got to be able to know the health of them and also build the processes in place that help them grow healthy. And so it takes a village to raise a healthy church. It takes a village to raise your kids. And so, I mean, if you have a church of 50 and you only have 5 small groups, I can guarantee you've got to have other players that can help you. Your team may be smaller, but you've got to have other people who can help you, because you've got to build the processes to build health for your small group ministry.
Right. And to clarify, you're not talking about just other small group leaders. You're talking about more systems and kind of a broader church ministry team.
Exactly. And so often that's what's neglected, because what you brought up is the tyranny of the urgent is, I need help caring for my groups. But what happens is we take care of that issue, but we neglect the system, which will really help us in the long run.
All right. So let's go for it. So what are the 10 things to consider when you're building your team? The first one, it's so obvious, but it's so true, that it starts with relationships.
Yeah, it's just relationship. And we have an adage when we talk about evangelism: you only win your friends to the Lord, because, it takes time with them before, you can talk to them about Jesus. And the same thing, in order to, raise your kids to be healthy, it takes time. With a marriage, it takes time. And spending time with people is called, building relationships. And so, the smaller your church is and the smaller your small group network is, the more relationships you've got to focus on. And you don't need as many systems in place, because you can do it all relationally. But you still have to figure out, where you're going. So, and relationships just take time. And so with each one of our pastors, it's important to look through, how many coffees are you doing? Morning coffees, afternoon coffees, how many lunches are you doing? How many breakfasts are you doing? Are you having people over to your house? Because you've got to build the time so that people trust you, so that when you speak the truth, they're more likely to act on it. So,
right. And I guess too, you don't know where the fruit will come from. And I know this ties to actually point 3, so I'll hold on to that thought. But the idea, well, let's just go there, because it naturally fits. So we're going to jump around a little bit. You're sharp. I think we can do this. So it ties to the point that you have to put yourself out there, right? So you can't just build relationships with people just because you like them, but you kind of have to almost be strategic about finding people in your church that potentially could come alongside and be part of your team.
Yeah, and that's, you got to find people that are not like you. And the problem is, we like to gravitate towards people that are like us. But the problem is, your gift set attracts the same gift set.
Right.
And so, the thing that you've learned, you got to learn, is that as you're building a small group ministry, is that it takes different types of players. They don't have to be your BFFs and your besties or anything like that, but they are people that have to have different giftings than you have. And so I recognize my giftings and what I'm good at, but there's many things I'm not good at. So I've got to find volunteers in the early years, or I got to find staff, in the more later years, when we have such a broad network that I can hire staff. But whether they're volunteers or staff, you got to have people that aren't like you. It doesn't mean that you don't have the same passions or anything like that, but they've got to have different gift sets.
Well, and then you have to go find them, which means you suggested that we go network. But how about this? Okay, so you are a major extrovert, and you could recruit, anything and anyone. Like, you're just wired for this. And having known you 20 plus years, I just know this is how you recruited me. This is how you recruit everybody. But what if our personalities aren't that way as a listener? What if we're more introverted? What if we just aren't very good at recruiting? And networking is just painful. So do you have any advice for if we're not naturally wired for those types of, high people skills?
Yeah, you got to find recruiters, and ironically,
okay.
I tend to be a little bit more of I'm very much on the line between the introvert and extrovert. But you're right. I'm probably a little bit more tenacious than most. But yeah. So whatever you're not, then you've got to find that. And the thing is, there are people you can go out there and say that are just as passionate in your church, but they're the ones that they thank you for that. And when you find people doing what they love to do, recruiters love to recruit. Then you just turn them loose on what you're trying to find in the profile, and you just got to work the ministry a different way. So it's just finding people you're not. So if you're more of an introvert, find the extroverts. They're not hard to find. Just go to any party and you'll see them front and center.
This is true. That's a really good word, because even that piece of it, you can find someone to help the ministry along. All right, so now we're going back to point 2. You have to look into the future. So for that, Steve, are you talking like 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? Like, what's the time frame that we need to pay attention to?
Well, one of the reasons why I love following collegiate sports is that those coaches are amazing, because they're looking 2 years. They're looking at sophomores and juniors in high school to recruit as freshmen in college. And so they're out looking at the terrain. And the way that translates in the church world is when you're recruiting people, you're rarely will you get a yes the first time. And so I'm always planning to hear no about 9 times.
Wow.
Because it just softens over time. And you may ask them 2 years ago, and they couldn't do it because of, something else's, stage of life, a business transition, something like that. But what happens is when you get the yes, it is never the first conversation. And so you've got to throw lots of seed down. I love 1 Corinthians 3 when Paul's talking about evangelism. He says, some plant, some water, and it's the Lord that brings the harvest. And there's so many transferable principles from evangelism to recruiting, because, you got to plant the seed. And you go, like you're saying, I might not be a seed planter, but someone's got to plant the seed. Someone's got to water, and someone's got to, bring in the harvest. And so you've got to be able to, have lots of conversations with people and, figure out. And so, when I'm talking to people, I'll recruit like it's going to happen tomorrow, knowing that I'll probably get a no, which is okay. But it will come down the line.
Right.
But it's always got to be looking out there and just saying, they may have just accepted Christ this week, but they've got gift set that you're going to need. And I would plant a seed to saying, hey, you're not ready right now, but I know you've got some giftings that the Lord is going to use to take our small group ministry to that next phase. And so, plan on hearing lots of no's. Don't worry about rejection. But on that side, I would go to the flip side of that and say, don't say no for them.
Yeah.
Often when we recruit, we almost build a case of why they should say no. And that's between them and the Holy Spirit, whether they say yes or whether they say no. Don't go, they're probably so busy they can't do it. Or
so why do we do that? I'm so guilty of this, because I do that thing. I'm like, he's commuting, he's so busy, the kids are little, he's already involved in this other stuff, so he's going to say no. And then I take him off my list. Like, why do we do that?
Yeah, and I have no idea why.
Well, I just want to burden them. I don't want to, and you're right, we shouldn't say no for them.
I mean, if we're high shepherds and stuff like that, we do probably just, we're empathetic.
Yes.
You know me, I rarely have feelings. So I'm just clueless about it. But
you're tenacious. I'm trying to shepherd. I don't play team sports, but I wanted to shepherd and make sure they're not overloaded. I'm trying to practice soul care for them.
I know. See, that's what's good about you. This is why we're a good team. But you, from that aspect, is that you just don't know all the circumstances. You don't know what's coming or going. And you're right. You do have to balance that. And, the person who doesn't want to say no to the pastor or no to the leadership, so you do have to balance all that out. But, again, I think more times than not, we play to giving them a reason to say no versus having the confidence and the privilege that it really is. Yeah. So when you're recruiting out in the future, it is such a privilege, because you want them to stand before God and help them hear, well done, thy good and faithful servants, with the gifts that they've been using. So I would start to look out there in the future, but also make sure you don't say no for them, because they may want to help you. And who knows, they may have 4 little ones, but they may have two nannies, and so, or au pairs if you want to go the fancy crew.
Okay, and part of what point 4, this is kind of connected to, is you need help selling your team. And I know that's kind of a very business way to look at it. So break that down for us in the ministry world. What do you mean?
Yeah, and everyone's an advocate to a different sect of people. We all run in groups and circles, and I may not necessarily run in all the circles. So you've got to get people who are your advocates, that you can let them know, hey, this is what I'm looking for in my team. These are the players that I need. And it's just networking with somebody saying, hey, you may not be it, but do you know of anybody in the circles that you run in that might be someone? So you're trying to find leads of people that other people may know. And I would be even risky enough to go, depending on what I was looking for, even if they gave me, hey, I work with somebody that loves to do this kind of stuff, whether they're a believer or not. I would love to learn from them. I go out to some lunches with some business people that run huge sales forces, and just love to learn from them. And they may not know they're part of my team, but they're a great learning tool for me. But at the same time, you find some people that want to help you because of relationship. So it's just a matter of getting in as many circles as possible throughout your church and really throughout your community.
Yeah, that's actually really helpful. And I think as you build relationship, even on staff, to go to different departments and ask, you may know this kind of person that I'm looking for. And hopefully there's enough trust that they, want to see people thrive, and if they're not in the best fit in their ministry, and then I do the same for ours. So along the way, because they do know different people, and as you're even with 150, you don't know all of them, you don't know all their skill sets. So I think asking those questions, and people always, even though they say no, people always seem honored to be asked. Yeah,
that's a good point. And you bring up a great point of just working inside your church circles also with that, because you're right. You may know the names, but you don't know what everybody does for a living, probably.
Right. No, that's helpful. Number 5 is, if you don't have vision and passion, you're sunk. That's pretty bluntly.
Well, you know me. I'm just so gracious. By the way, listeners, these were rough notes I gave Carolyn, but I'm glad you took them as literal. But you really are. And, the Bible's very clear. Without a vision, people perish. Or as we like to say, without a vision, people go to another parish.
I have not heard that. Nice.
So it's going to be very, very important that you understand people don't give to need. People give to vision. If people gave to need, every needy organization would have everything it would need. And so, but people give to vision, and people want to be an intrinsic felt need people have. Is they want to be a part of something bigger than them. I want to be part of something bigger than me. And by better together, they're making an impact in their church when they're a part of something that's far bigger than them. And people love to be a part of that. So you've got a vision cast of what you're trying to do, and think big, dream big, because it's so important throughout, in the Bible. And you look at all the great churches that we look at, people had a vision for what God wanted them to do, and people want to be a part of that. So share your vision. If you don't feel you have a vision, I would get alone with God and say, God, why did you put me in this church? What vision do you want me to do? What do I want to dream big about? Because when you dream, big things happen. But if you don't dream, then it just won't. It won't take root.
Yeah, and I think we make the mistake, again, back to the task part, where we invite people to come partner with us in ministry by telling them what it is we need them to do, instead of looking at it as, here's the vision, and then letting them identify how they can be part of it and what they can do out of who they are, which is so much bigger and just much more enjoyable, I think, joyful. And you're right. I mean, some people will say yes to the task because they are responsible and they want to serve the church. But for the kind of people you want on the team that you're describing, Steve, it seems like you want people who are going to give themselves over to the vision and the cause, because then they're not going to count the cost in like, how many hours, or they're not going to feel like it's a task, but it's much more of a responsibility and an honor to be part of that.
Yeah, and you touched on a great point there, because part of envision casting, people find they feel called to it. And when you're called to something, that solidifies you not only in the good times, but also in the tough times.
Right.
Because, part of tenaciousness that, we've talked about so much so far on this call is it's linked directly to your calling. Because your calling is going to tell you how long you're going to last. Because if you're called in those tough times, you will keep pushing through the ministry. And there's going to be those tough times.
It's true.
But you want people around you that are called to the same vision and say, you know what, we may be delayed right now, but that doesn't mean God's denying us this vision that we're after. And so you just got to, press on with it.
Well, number 6 is very connected to the tenaciousness. I'm seeing a theme here. Push for commitment.
Yeah.
So it's not ask for a commitment. That's how I would have put it. Steve puts it, push for commitment. Okay, so how do you push for commitment in a non-guilt, non-manipulative, relationally heavy-handed way? Not that you would ever do that, but I'm just saying.
Are you saying those are all bad?
Some might argue that we want to push for commitment in a way that's maybe kind of without some of that baggage. I don't know.
Yeah, it's got to be shaped to who you are. I mean, you can't be something you're not. But my point on this thing is don't leave it open-ended. I mean, part of it is, you're building a team, and to say, hey, could you pray about it? But I'd love to hear from you on Monday, or can I call you back on Monday? Because, it's kind of like in schooling when a teacher, extends your final and say, oh, we're not going to have the final, Tuesday, we'll have it 2 weeks from now. Does that mean I'm going to spend the next 2 weeks studying even more? No, I'm going to still wait to the same Monday night. And I know that's where you and I are opposite.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
But you go, it's a gift. But the more times than not, people know which way they're going to go. And so I just, it is, you've got to read the situation. And that's why the relationship is so important. So they see your heart, that when you ask for a commitment, saying, hey, do you want to be a part of this? Then they hear it coming from a pastor that says, I want to do something for the kingdom. And if you want to be a part of this, that's great. And so, I mean, that's why in every one of our classes, when I talk about the class system at Saddleback, we have a covenant at the end of every one of them, because we want people to wrestle with is, do you want to be a part of this? And in the same way, I don't want to leave it open-ended and to say, if any time over the next 6 months you want to jump in, but I want to be able to lead and say, hey, if this is something you want to be a part of, I'd love to have you be a part of. But at the same time, I know God's calling, me to find people that want to help be a part of this. So I really want you. But, and they still may say no. Right. And if you really do want them, come on back and to say, I can't shake you off my mind. And God still keeps putting your name in my head.
Right.
Tell me if I'm wrong and what I should do. But you just want to keep that gentle love right there in front of them. So.
I think that idea of giving them a deadline, that's a really good one, because it's about timing, right?
Yeah.
So, and the timing is between them and God. So I think I had a situation where I invited somebody to do something on our team, and then they kind of avoided me for weeks in the lobby. Yeah. And then I realized it's because I didn't put a time. So I was okay with them saying no, but they felt bad. And so they wanted to say no, but they didn't have the gumption to actually say it because they felt bad about it. So they just avoided me. And so eventually I chased them down. I was like, hey, are things cool? What did you decide? And it just kind of cleared the air, because really I was okay with it, but it just created an awkwardness. So I think the clarity you're suggesting of giving them a time frame makes it nicer for both sides. And then I love the language you just used, though. If they say no, but you really want them, and you feel like God is calling them, and you like to be the Holy Spirit in people's lives, Steve. I know this is one of your gifts. But then you come back around and say, hey, I'm still praying about that or whatever. And I think you're absolutely right. You can do it in a way that's very honoring and discipling of people rather than in a way that maybe is more pressure. You can do it without pressure really well.
Yeah, and it's relational. I mean, in this little, role we got going right here, it sounds more transactional, but really everything is relationally based. And so they know your heart.
Right.
They know who you are.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so then fill your team with people who get you to the next level.
Yeah, this is one where I'm always encouraging staff, because so often when we have a hole, we just want to find a name, a body,
because we have tasks.
and I'll speak out of both sides of my mouth. There are people that are tweeners that will fill the hole and kind of get you to, to that next. They may buy you a few months or whatever the timeline is, but I just would encourage people, when you're recruiting, ask yourself that question: is this person going to take me to that next level? Or are we just going to stay status quo with them and they're going to fill a role, or are they going to help challenge it? And I understand that, if you go someone who's going to go status quo, then during that time I would say, hey, God, you pray with God and to say, hey, help me find the person that's going to take us to that next level. And that is part of, in recruiting, sometimes you just don't get the A player every time, but you keep the ball moving and you keep it rolling, because someone's gonna come along that will be the person that will take it to the next level. But it's kind of like a parable of the talents. Just be faithful with what God's giving you, but pray and be conscious, whatever. Thank you. The word I can't say, but be aware that the person, you need another player. And so always ask yourself internally, and be gracious. Obviously, you don't tell that person that, but you've got to know what's going on.
And it takes so much humility to kind of say, and you have to be self-aware enough as the small group point leader to say, hey, for this ministry to go to the next level, I need some talents and skills that I don't have and that the team currently does not have, and not be threatened by hiring somebody who's, I think Jim Collins talks about the level 5 leader. If you're a 3, most likely you're going to just hire a 3, but really what moves you forward is if you actually get a 4 or 5, or whatever level you are, but just to jump it. I think that's so important. Okay, so the next two kind of are very similar to each other. You will make bad picks. I love the reality of that because I've done this. And 9 is the chemistry development and passion, that how important those elements are. So talk about that. Like with the bad picks, you find out there isn't chemistry. They don't share the passion, or somehow they're trying, but they're like more filler rather than the next level. Like how do you decide how long to keep people around?
Yeah. And again, let me go back just to the first statement. Everybody, you're never going to make the right pick 100% of the time. I've hired staff, I've gotten volunteers, and some have worked, some haven't. And it's just a reality of life. It breaks my heart. I tend to focus too much on it. I tend to beat myself up too much about it. But it's just a reality. Sometimes it's how God, moves the chess pieces around. I don't get it, but it happens. So this first reality is just understand that that's a reality. But as you're talking about when they're in there, a lot of times it is. This is where in small group ministry, there's both an art to it and there's a science. And we're talking about some science things, but there's an art to it because we're dealing with people and you're dealing with feelings, and we are in the people business, and it's not transactional. It's not a widget.
Right.
And so a lot of it is praying about it. I'm not copping out by saying, just pray, but there is praying for the right timing. Some of us are wired that when we see something that, okay, I made a bad pick, well, let's get rid of it now. It's a light switch. I would just encourage you to be more like a dimmer switch. Let's not throw it on and off, but pray for that right timing, and you can reduce the role. You can try to help find, where their gifting might be better. You may move them may try to repot them into a different part of the small group team. But there's also the honesty that's there. Whether they're volunteers or whether they're paid staff, I try to tell our staff, they should never ever be surprised about what conversation you're going to have when you need to transition them, because you've had conversations, you've talked about gifting, you've talked about performance,
Right.
and a lot of times we only think that for paid staff, but it's also for volunteers too,
Right.
because we're trying to do the work of the ministry, and if they want a title but they don't want to do it, then you got to have those hard conversations. But when the time comes that they step out, or you've asked them to step out, then nobody should be surprised, because you've had multiple conversations.
So for the bad picks, I mean, just as a short way of saying it, how important is chemistry to you in terms of who's on your team? That you enjoy being with them, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think chemistry to the team and chemistry to me are quite different.
Okay.
Chemistry to the team and the cause we're trying to do has to be there.
Okay.
Chemistry to me, the closer people are to my inner circle, the more I've got to have that chemistry with myself and just the way I'm wired, the way I am. I mean, you and I are opposites
Yes.
in some ways, but we would have that same chemistry, even though we're wired very differently. But I have a lot of people on the team and a lot of community leaders that are throughout all of our campuses, and I wouldn't necessarily have personal chemistry with them, but we all have a chemistry to what the main vision is of what we're trying to do in the network.
That's a good distinguishing point. So you could actually have someone that you don't have to, as you said earlier, be besties with, but you have to share the commitment to the mission and the vision together. And then the 10th one is that team is only part of the equation. You need to have a plan.
Yeah. Everything distills down into work. And it's a stinky thing about ministry, but it does. But, Proverbs 21:5, talks, about a plan will get you down the road, but hurry and scurry will delay it. And part of what we tends to be our Achilles heel is hurry and scurry tend to be so many good things in our ministry.
Yes.
But when you have a plan, you do the things that will help your ministry be great, not just do the good things to be good. And so part of that is you're the small group point person. You have got to focus on the priority that will get you down the road. Because if you're not thinking about it, nobody else is, and they're looking to you. So you've got to have a plan in place. You've got to have that team that can help you build those attributes of that plan, so that you can have some concrete things that you're shooting for, that you're dreaming for. You can identify obstacles, that you can put SMART goals behind, so that you can see if you're making progress. Because it's going to take plans that can help you, make it happen. I mean, you see the analogies in building a house. There's no one that's going to drop money into a house without thinking through, what's the plan of it? What are you trying to do? What do you want to build? And so you're building something far more important than any building on this planet. And so think through of, how are you building a plan to take your ministry to that next level.
And a great tool is such a great segue. The great tool for that is the book that you wrote, just came out really recently, Planning Small Groups with Purpose. And it is really practical. You work through a plan. And what I love about it is whether the ministry is brand new, like you're just launching it, or you're relaunching small groups ministry at a church, or you've been doing it for a long time, there's just a very practical ways to look at the strategic planning. And I know that's one of your strengths, the whole strategic piece. And it's easy to kind of keep doing the same thing over and over, and because it's working in that well enough. But what you're talking about, to take things to the next level, requires it's just really the work of sitting down, thinking it through, making the plan, and then working the plan. So if for our listeners, if they're kind of in that place where it's time to reevaluate things and make some tweaks and develop a team that'll take you to the next level, I'd really recommend the book. And I think I just saw a promotion we're doing on our Facebook Small Group Network page that if you start a huddle, you're giving away the book. Does this true?
Yeah, start a huddle, and I think it's the month of June. We'll get you a copy of the book. So if you want to be smart, we'll work the angles, and so it's amazing what we'll do. So we love it. But I do want to focus on that because both you and I have been in this game a long time, and it's not that you have any knowledge somebody else doesn't have, but when you've been doing it for like I have for 30 plus years, there are a few things that go through it. And the thing I would just focus in on the book is that, those of us who've been in small group ministry a long time, the same ones keep coming up over and over again. And so having it in one place so that you can dial into it, so you can build a plan, will help you. So, I just encourage you, you don't have to have our church paradigm, but you do have to answer these questions because they're going to come up to you. So you just want to be ahead of the game, which is part of knowing in a plan, you got to have a playbook for you and for your church. So.
Right. And if you are part of a huddle, what the cool thing is you can actually share your playbook with each other and get peer feedback on it. And it's so encouraging because you're right. Everybody's kind of dealing with very similar things. They have tried different things. So we'd rather learn from your mistakes, Steve, than make them ourselves. And so that's the labor of love of the book is you've done this, it works, and you're kind of guiding us along the path.
Well, one of the other great things too is the network's going to be rolling out our communities of purpose, which will be huddles that want to take their learning to the next level. And we can talk about that more later, but you can go on smallgroupnetwork.com/COP for communities of purpose, not for cops, but it's, communities of purpose. And you can read all about it and see what we've got brewing.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for your time. And if you want to connect with Steve, he's on all the various social medias and you can connect with him. He's also super active on our Facebook page. You're more than welcome to interact and ask him questions. Maybe there's more than 10 or you want to know more about what type of team you're building. And he's great at answering those questions. So please feel free to interact with him on that. So thank you, Steve, so much. Always a joy to hang with you. And I always learn. You always teach me. It's remarkable.
And it goes both ways. So, I love it. That's why we're better together.
We definitely are. So thank you for listening to Group Talk. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Here to There, part of the Group Talk Network of podcasts. If you like what you've heard, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. If you want to learn more, make sure you check out smallgroupnetwork.com for more resources.